All right, we're doing it live.
I hope someone actually watches like the YouTube outtakes.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Bored as Hell podcast. I'm Adam McDonald with Big Shiny Robot.
And I am Andy Wilson, aka Citizen Bot, also a big shiny robot.
And we got 3 movies to talk to you about this week. They kind of run the gamut from chef's movies to political films. You'll hear what we have to say in a second. Neither one of us got to see Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. I know I was really excited for it. I had to work. Things happen sometimes. It's getting really, really mixed to okay reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. But our good friend Brooks Bird, who was on here a couple episodes ago when we did The Martian, he loved it. He thought it was fantastic. So if you want to read a positive review, go check him out over at The Real Cinema Nerd or also The Real Place, Facebook, online, wherever else. But Andy, the one you got to see that I wanted to, because I'm a huge cooking / Gordon Ramsay fan, and I have no idea if it actually was in that kind of vein of things, was Burnt. So what was Burnt about for it?
So, Burnt, you mentioned Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay actually served as the chef consultant for this movie.
Oh, good.
And so it's essentially Bradley Cooper playing a Gordon Ramsay type character. Brilliant, driven chef, maybe kind of an a-hole, but because he's so exacting and demanding, he doesn't put up with the shortcomings of other people around him, which of course leads him to being kind of a jerk to people.
So if you've seen like Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, and that is both a good side and a bad side to this movie. The shortest review I can give to this is, if I'd have spent 2 hours watching 2 episodes of Hell's Kitchen, I would have had a better time. Would have been more entertaining than this. But this movie is not without merit itself. So Bradley Cooper is playing this chef, Adam Jones, who was once at the top of the Paris food scene. And he had risen to the top. He worked at a restaurant that had been given 2 very prestigious Michelin stars. As one of the other characters in this film explains, to get 1 star, you need to be Luke Skywalker. 2, you're Obi-Wan Kenobi. And if you get that 3rd elusive one, you're Yoda. So he's really driven. He really wanted to get that 3rd star. It never happened. And in a drug-fueled meltdown, he betrayed everyone around him. They lost their restaurant, and he went into rehab and obscurity in hiding to try and come back and make a comeback. So here he is several years later, and he comes back to London and tries to put the band back together and tries to open a restaurant in his former maitre d's restaurant and go after that 3rd Michelin star. It gets really predictable from there on out. Enemies become friends, friends become enemies. The protege and the main guy have a romantic affair. It's really kind of by the books and by the numbers. And the real problem is this movie ends up being very much like the food that they are creating. It's very fussy. It's very overwrought. And in the end, I think not hugely satisfying and not a great value for your dinner-going dollar or your movie-going dollar. The biggest problem I have with this is a movie about food and about being a chef. And there was nary a bit of food porn in here.
See, that makes me sad because I know you were talking about the what was it? Was it Chef?
Yeah.
The movie and about how there's so much of the movie is food porn. I think you even said, isn't the credits like the most mouth-watering way of watching someone make a grilled cheese sandwich or something?
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. But this movie it's very clinical. It's very exacting. And his whole idea behind making food is about making people kind of suffer and longing. And he said anybody can make a restaurant full of people hungry. I want to make people be filled with longing. And it's like, whoa, yeah, that's
not what a restaurant does, dude.
Over the top. It's like, okay, I can see where he's going. but they never quite reach there. But the movie plays out in a relatively predictable fashion. Bradley Cooper's good. Sienna Miller's good. Everyone in this movie is good. There's nothing really terrible about it. But at the end, again, if this movie were a meal and I went out to like a 5-star restaurant to try this, I'd walk away feeling like, I probably would have had just as good of a meal at an Applebee's.
Oh.
Yeah. So, if you've ever had like a fine dining experience that's kind of like that, I kind of feel that's how Burnt is. So I ended up at 4 out of 10. It's not terrible, but it's nothing great. And in the season where we're getting into prestige pictures and Oscar bait, this just doesn't quite measure up.
It's kind of funny the way you described that. It's almost so there was I think we even talked about it. There was a really cool Netflix documentary series called The Chef's Table, which was directed or produced by the same guy who did Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which is to this day one of my favorite documentaries of all time. It's fantastic. I think it's still on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But the whole point of this documentary series was, first of all, getting to know the chefs and getting to find out where their culinary heart came from. Why do you make food? Why is food important to you? And it was really cool to see these people who are some of the most well-renowned, maybe not the most famous. They're not the Gordon Ramsays or the Chef Miyamoto of the world, but they're the ones who are doing the craziest, the most unique things from farm to table to literally giving you artwork that you're eating. I mean, one of them was they gave you it was like a map of a country. And when you went inside, there were farms and there were this and that. And it actually was food you could eat. It was gorgeous just to watch. And to see these people, the exact opposite of this character saying, food's from the heart, food's there to nourish you, food is there to be an experience. It almost sounds like that they kind of took the approach of like the culinary school take on this movie is that let's teach you the dried bits of like how to cut an onion. No one cares how you cut the onion. They care about how you present it. And it almost seems from what you're saying that this movie was more in tune and cared more about the down to the bolts technique of this and that and didn't really care from the food side and the filmmaking side as far as what the audience felt.
Yeah, it isn't really satisfying. It's like anytime they really and it's funny, they really tried to say something about the state of gourmet cooking now and how everything is prepared in these water baths in these
sous vide, yeah.
And the very high culinary, or what's it called, like chemical gastronomy or
gastronomy, yeah.
Like I see these people doing these crazy things on Iron Chef and things like that, and I'm just amazed. And they're like, no, let's get back to basics and just do none of that crazy stuff. Let's just do the normal fussy French cuisine. And I'm just like, that's not getting back to basics. Like, go watch Ratatouille. Like, that's getting like a back to
right. And it's really funny, we mentioned I joked about Gordon Ramsay at the beginning, not knowing his input on this movie. I've been a huge Gordon Ramsay fan since, for like a decade now. Not just because he's entertaining as hell, like on Kitchen Nightmares and Hell's Kitchen and MasterChef, but he actually is a decent chef. And I've tried to incorporate some of his recipes into my normal cooking dish. And if you ever ask my husband Eddie or our good friend Jeremiah, they're probably getting fat based off the food I make because I love to cook, love it to death. But it's almost funny that Gordon Ramsay was involved because his whole cooking thing, I mean, yes, he was a classically trained French chef, is that it's about the simple, basic foods and what you can do to take the best ingredients and make them shine and make them the star of the dish. This is one of my favorite meals I've made based off his recipes have all of like 4 ingredients aside from spices. It sounds like it's just frustrating to think that he would be involved in something that kind of missed the point of his whole idea of what he thinks food should be. So
yeah, and maybe I took the wrong message away from this, but I felt like he was more angry than he was more troubled than he was a genius.
Yeah, and then that works in certain circumstances, but if you're going to have a whole movie about someone who is quote unquote this genius, that genius needs to shine through more than their being an a-hole.
Exactly.
So, speaking of another movie that I think both of you was a bit underwhelming, was Our Brand is Crisis, which is the newest film starring Sandra Bullock and Billy Bob Thornton. And Sandra Bullock plays Calamity Jane, or otherwise known as where did her name go?
Jane Bodine.
There it is. Okay, I had Wikipedia up on my mouse. Okay. So Sandra Bullock is playing Jane Bodine, otherwise known as Calamity Jane. She was a retired political consultant in U.S. politics. She quit because it was bad for her health. She was just not feeling well. She was smoking too much, drinking too much, doing all the things that I'm pretty sure we both agree that someone with that much stress in their life would probably, get involved with. Well, she gets approached and dragged out of retirement to help out a struggling right-wing Bolivian politician named Pedro Gallo, who in this is played by, I hate Wikipedia. I hate it so much. Pedro Gallo, who's played by Joaquin de Almeida. He's behind the polls over 30 points. He had been the president of Bolivia for a while, years before, and was very unpopular, got voted out very quickly, and so he's looking for a new way to shape his campaign to win. Going against very popular leftist, somewhat socialist president campaigner who is being represented by Billy Bob Thornton, who plays Pat Candy, who's always been James' nemesis. In every single campaign she went up against him, he beat her all 4 times. So she's been kind of down and out. She's in Bolivia. She's getting used to the altitude difference. She's kind of out of it. And, just kind of sitting there watching. And the presidential campaign is like, going, why is she here? What is she doing? She's doing nothing. She's sitting there. She's watching us. And all of a sudden she just snaps. She's like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to say Bolivia is in a state of crisis. So your campaign, your brand, here comes the movie title, is Crisis. So he goes out on the campaign trail and proves that, yes, he's unlikable. Yes, he's kind of mean. Yes, he can be a bit violent sometimes. But that's the candidate that Bolivia needs because it's going to hell in a handbasket. And he's the only one who can help solve things. And she's almost doing it not so much, obviously she doesn't believe in the candidate. It's more to prove she can do this. It's more to prove that she can beat Pat Candy, Billy Bob Thornton, and eventually win this election. And when she does win the election, spoiler alert, because no one went and saw this, no one will, she realizes that, oh crap, I might have done the wrong thing and maybe need to switch gears and do something different with my political activism. So this movie is based very loosely on a 2005 or 2001 documentary.
Yeah.
2005 documentary of the same name, Our Brand is Crisis. Here's my biggest problem with this. There were parts of this movie that were very, very entertaining. It has some very whip-smart dialogue every so often. But at the same time, it'd be really smart, really funny, and then the next scene would be overly dramatic. And then it'd be smart, funny, dramatic. Anthony Mackie co-stars as one of her campaigners, and he's a good actor. He does a good job, but he just wasted. His character feels like he's there just as a prop. In fact, everyone except for Sandra Bullock and Billy Bob Thornton feel like they're just there to pad the cast because this is very much their movie. They're both really good at what they do, but there's so much lacking. At the end of the movie, I was like, I didn't care who won. I didn't care what she did with her life. I didn't care if this is based on a true story. I just didn't care. And it's really hard to be excited or recommend a movie where that level of apathy is all you come out of it with.
Yeah. Anthony Mackie, I thought was great, but he was so over earnest. Okay. Personal confession time. What feels like a lifetime ago, I actually worked as a political consultant for several years, doing polling for several people who were governors, presidential candidates, senators, people who you've heard of. Doesn't matter who they were, but let's just say
it was George Bush.
No, several of them had big sex scandals between 2008 and 2009. So, yeah, ask me about that sometime if you ever run into me. Anyway, but I thought I was naive and earnest and like, oh, I'm the good guy and I'm in this for all the right reasons because democracy is awesome and yeah, Anthony Mackie like takes it a step higher than I ever would have. And I'm just like, you know, I know this is supposed to be a movie and there's supposed to be characters, but there's no one like that in the world of campaigns. Not only that, but the best thing about politics, it's fun. It's a contact sport for nerds, and we love it. Like, it's just a great high, and at its best, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. And it's almost like an adrenaline junkie sort of thing. And that's why people do this work. And when you have a movie based on true events with larger than life characters like James Carville, who was one of these political consultants who was in the original Our Brand is Crisis in 2005 in the 2002 Bolivian elections. When you have characters like that and they're shrunk down to these kind of two-dimensional characters, it just feels unreal. And I think that was the real failing of this movie. I really wanted a lot more of super smarmy Billy Bob Thornton. I thought he was great, but
oh yeah, the scenes between him and Sandra Bullock, they're so much fun. I mean, the one that just got me laughing uproariously was they're sitting there before the final debate before the election, and they're kind of reminiscing because as much as they're enemies, they're kind of frenemies, that they're kind of pushing each other, and you can't tell if there's some kind of like subdued sexual tension there. I mean, who knows? In fact, Billy Bob Thornton makes a pretty hilarious joke about that, which I won't repeat here. But she says a quote to him and attributes it to some philosopher, and then knowing that he was going to give his the politician he was representing the same quote, and so he says it on this huge TV thing, and immediately afterwards she goes and leaks out the fact that he just gave a quote by Joseph Goebbels, who was the horrendous Nazi experimenter bastard, pretty much. And it was just we all sat there and we laughed uproariously. Like, even one of our most jaded film critics I've ever known laughed his ass off because it was hilarious and it was a great moment. It's just there weren't enough of those moments to sustain it through the whole movie.
Exactly. And that's exactly what this needed. And that like momentary, oh dear God, what have I done? And oh, everything's so horrible and I need to change my life realization at the end. It was just like, we bring the movie to a grinding halt right at the end and change gears. And as I walked out, I was like, this movie was okay and it had me until those last 5 minutes. And then I'm just like, nope, I was giving you the benefit of the doubt.
Oh yeah, the last scene where, spoiler alert, she has a crisis of conscience and gets out of the bus and starts walking with the protesters. I'm like, no.
Nope.
I really wanted to like it more, especially when we had this great dialogue with Steve Jobs, and this one tried. It's like diet caffeine-free Steve Jobs dialogue.
Ah, yes.
That's the best way I could say it. So I ended up at, oh God, I'm at a 3.5. I wanted to go 4, but the more I think about it, the more it just irks me. And it more irks me because not just that there was contrite dialogue and it didn't know what it wanted to do, but because there was such really great play between Billy Bob Thornton and Sandra Bullock, and they're both great in this. It was a waste of their talent to be in a movie that didn't know what it wanted to do.
Yeah, and I think this movie was tailor-made for someone like me, and I should have loved it the same way that Steve Jobs was tailor-made for me. And when you don't even have my respect and my love, yeah, this is a 5 out of 10 for me. So, yeah, your mileage may vary, but
yeah,
lots of people liking this.
So, and then what was the third movie again? Because again, this is one that didn't even screen for us. I didn't even know it was out.
Yeah, so this is called Truth, and man, with as lofty a title as Truth, and it being about real life events that are only about a decade old and larger than life figures like Dan Rather, you better bring it. This movie does not bring it.
Oh.
Again, this is prestige season. This is Oscar season. And it's terrible to see these movies that had a lot of potential being brought out and then just kind of flop all over the place. I think that's a common theme amongst all three of these movies is they're just kind of boring and don't bring it to the level of where they needed to be. That being said, the cast here is pretty good. Cate Blanchett plays Mary Mapes, who is a producer at 60 Minutes, a real life person. And as the beginning of the film shows, she's the one who broke the story on Abu Ghraib and prisoner abuse and a lot of other things. Very well known in the TV journalism world. And so coming out after Abu Ghraib says, there's a story back from 2000 that we never got to really investigate. And it was all of these rumors about George W. Bush and his time in the Texas Air National Guard. And I think he's a draft dodger. And I'm going to put together a team and we're going to go out and prove it. And so she's aided in this, of course, by Dan Rather, played here by Robert Redford. And here is the first biggest problem of this movie. As big and iconic as Dan Rather is, I would argue Robert Redford is far more iconic. And it's so hard to take someone like Robert Redford and sit and watch him for an hour and a half and believe, yeah, that's Dan Rather. He tries to bring it. He's got this, he brings that like great genteel Southern charm and a little bit of that Texas buttermilk flavored twang in, but it's just not quite there. And he never quite settles into the role the same way that we've seen like Michael Fassbender as Steve Jobs. And that's the difference between a great iconic performance and just kind of a meh performance. And that's where we are here. Great supporting cast, though. Dennis Quaid, Topher Grace, Elizabeth Moss all play three other reporters working with them to try and bring in this story. And Bruce Greenwood plays the head of CBS. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes intrigue of what happens, and I think that this story is actually utterly fascinating about exactly what happened, the documents that they were able to find that they believe showed that a young Lieutenant Bush was absent without leave from the Texas Air National Guard for as much as a year or two, and the kind of huge, I want to say shitstorm. I'm trying to think of a better word. And kind of the huge backlash that this reporting brought on. And then it became all about the documents and how these documents couldn't have been made the way that they said that they were. They actually show, yes, they could have. They show, to a great extent, these documents were likely true, hence the name Truth. But because this huge controversy came up, it became about Dan Rather and CBS News' journalistic ethics rather than a presidential candidate and his time as a young man. So that is an injustice on a different level, but it's how politics are played. I mean, we just got done talking about being a political consultant, and this is exactly how masters like Karl Rove play it. And they did a great job doing that in the news, and they took down Dan Rather, and they took down Mary Mapes, and we're supposed to feel sorry for them. And you know what? I just don't.
Oh, and by the way, just so everyone wanted to know, as portrayed on American Dad, it is true that if Karl Rove walks into a church, he bursts into flames. So
it is true. Sorry, that was.
And from what I'm getting now is like you guys all will get a better sense of enjoyment out of that lame ass joke than you would out of this movie.
That is true, and this is just boring. These events deserve better. Dan Rather, the person, deserves better. Mary Mapes, the person, deserves better. And this film deserved better. This is just like a very bad telling of these events. And yeah, and again, kind of boring. 3.5 out of 10.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, so we've, unfortunately, this week we've given you 3 kind of bad movies, 2 bad political ones, and 1 bad culinary one. But we challenged ourselves for our recommendation this week, literally 20 minutes ago. Just think of some good movies that are in this same vein of political or culinary film. So I immediately, before even like we finished the conversation, thought of Wag the Dog, which was a movie back in 1997. It was directed by Barry Levinson, who actually directed Rock the Casbah, which we talked about and hated on last week. This is actually one of his good movies. So for those not familiar, I'm not going to go too in-depth for the script or the story, but basically 2 weeks before Election Day, the president is the media finds out the president may have been involved with or has been, made some advances on an underage girl. And so they hire a spin doctor, played by Robert De Niro, to come in and be like, look, you got to make this go away. The election's in 2 weeks. The president has to win re-election. So he hires a Hollywood producer, played by Dennis Hoffman, to come in and Dustin Hoffman, to come in and basically create a fake war, complete with a bomb. They pretended to bomb Albania. They got an orphan played by Kirsten Dunst to come in and be like, oh no, my homeland, and played it out on the news to fully distract, in a sense, instead of wagging the tail, you wag the dog. There's your title. Distract the media and the American people from what actually happened. So they put him back in office because, hey, you don't want to kick the president out in wartime. That'd be horrible. In the meantime, the CIA is trying to figure out what happened, and William H. Macy is a CIA agent trying to, figure out this war because they have no intelligence about this. They're seeing what's on the news, like, what the hell is going on? Come to find out, they learn what's going on, so they say, okay, we won't say anything, but you got to shut this down. So they do, and then everyone starts sniffing around to the sex scandal again. So again, Robert De Niro steps in, has Dustin Hoffman invent there's this wounded war hero who was left behind the scenes, and we need to get him now, and blah blah blah. And it's and Woody Harrelson's playing him, who ends up being a bat sock crazy army prison. Oh, it's a really really black dark comedy, but at the same time, it's really funny. It's incredibly well written and directed, and it came out in theaters like a month before the whole Monica Lewinsky thing happened. And of course, right after that happened, we bombed Sudan.
Iraq.
So everyone,
I think in Iraq too. Didn't we bomb Saddam Hussein at that same time?
No, because this was after Desert. Well, anyways, we started our own war, and everyone was like, "We just saw this played out on the movies. What the hell is going on here?" Mr. Clinton. And so it was, if you want to see a great political spin / shows political hacks and how the system is rigged to really distract us via the media, except for us, of course, with the good media, from what's actually happening in real life. Wag the Dog is hilarious. I watched it with my mom, and my mom hates R-rated movies, and she loved it more than I did. So I can't recommend it enough. It's funny. It's well written, and even nowadays, it still holds true the distraction we get from pop culture based on what's actually happening in the media. I mean, Donald Trump is a distraction. He's not the issue of what's going on for the Republican or the Democratic Party. And I'm sorry if you like him, but you're wrong.
What are you talking about, Adam? Donald Trump is the greatest, best Republican candidate for president ever.
Look, if you're going to vote for Donald Trump, just stop. Go to your ballot. Okay, you're going to write in now. You're going to write in for President Adam McDonald and Vice President the Badger, because my pug will be a better vice president than he can be president. That's all.
That is true. Speaking of the Clintons, and also speaking of Billy Bob Thornton, one of the first movies.
Look at us. We're getting good at this.
Yeah, that popped into my head when we were talking about other better movies about political consultants. Is also from that same era, 1998's Primary Colors, directed by Mike Nichols. And this was based on a novel that was originally published by Anonymous. And for years and years and years, everyone said, well, who is Anonymous? And no one would say. Turned out it was Time reporter Joe Klein. who had been inside the Clinton campaign during 1992. And so this is kind of his semi-fictionalized version of what that was like. And John Travolta plays Governor Jack Stanton, and Emma Thompson plays his wife, Susan Stanton, who are, of course, Bill and Hillary Clinton. Billy Bob Thornton plays a thinly veiled reference to James Carville. And Maura Tierney plays a thinly veiled version of George Stephanopoulos, which, first of all, brilliant turning George Stephanopoulos into a woman. I just always celebrated the irony of that. That's great. And there are a lot of shenanigans that happened during the 1992 presidential campaign. Another kind of side movie to watch at the same time with this would be D.A. Pennebaker's The War Room, a great documentary about what actually happened with the 1992 presidential campaign and those same three political consultants. So it's very interesting to sit there and watch the truth and the fictionalized version. The fictionalized version, way more entertaining. Just Travolta has so much fun here playing this, oh shucks, Southern governor, and he goes around and all of his rallies, he's like, and now I want to play my favorite tune ever played or ever written by a Southern governor, "You Are My Sunshine," and so all of his rallies have "You Are My Sunshine" playing with him. It's like, oh, that's so genius. It's so so beautiful. Emma Thompson she's amazing, and she's heartbreaking here as, of course, I won't say we all remember because this is pretty obscure at this point, but during the 1992 campaign, all of these things started coming out about Governor Clinton and allegations about sexual harassment and affairs, and how she finds out about these, and the lengths the campaign goes to discredit these women or pay them off. Emma Thompson it's just heartbreaking, her performance here, and you find so much pathos for her, which don't go in thinking about her performance as Hillary Clinton, because Hillary is very polarizing in and of herself, but just go in and watch that performance for the sake of Emma Thompson's performance. It's just absolutely beautiful. And of course, like I said, Billy Bob Thornton and Maura Tierney. It's great. They and one of the other political consultants, played by Adrian Lester. The campaign's in such financial dire straits that all three of them have to share a bed everywhere they go. It's really funny, the rapport that they have in there. And Kathy Bates is another political consultant that they bring in, who also has a very interesting and tragic turn near the end that, unless you know a lot, you will not see coming. So, primary colors, it's probably more true than truth, and definitely more political consultancy and Billy Bob Thornton-y than Our Brand is Crisis. Oh, Adam, you're muted.
Which again is sad, because that should have been a much better movie than it was. So, anyways, 3 best movies this week, padded with 2 political movies that are good. Coming up next week, we've got the Peanuts movie, which I unfortunately, no matter what I do, I cannot see for the screening, so I'm going to try desperately to see it. I think I have Friday off, so maybe I can see it then. So I'm actually really excited for that. That was one that I was kind of about, and then trailers have got me excited. Spectre, the new James Bond movie, which I'm very, very excited for, followed by Suffragette, which I'm assuming is about, sounds like women's right to vote, and then Miss You Already, which is something that I've never heard of. So next week, overall, if anything, Bond should hopefully be good. Hopefully Peanuts will be good, and we will see you then. Hail Satan, and have a lovely afternoon.